KLTV soundcheck. KLTV soundcheck.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to 9 a.m. public meeting of the BOCC. We have Paul Bricknell with us today to lead us in an invocation with the Cowlitz chaplaincy.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, commissioners. Let's take a moment and pause and reflect. Heavenly Father, we come before you humbly, recognizing that you're the one who started the day and you're the one who ends the day. And all the other things that you, while we were sleeping, you are working. And I ask that you would continue to give us as your, I pray that you give the commissioners wisdom. I pray that you give them a listening ear. Help them to hear what our county is saying. Help them to lead well and with integrity. And we ask that you would just continue to go before us in all things. I ask that you watch over everyone, from the young to the old, and that you would continue to lead us and guide us. And today we ask in your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. You want to join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Smith, good to see you today. Lloyd, yeah. I'm not used to it without your camera. Yeah. I would entertain a review motion on the minutes.
Mr. Chair, move to approve the minutes of April 14th through 16th.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Any questions, comments, corrections? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. We'll run down consent agenda. We have agreements, contracts, bid awards. Items 1 and 2 are related. These are both on the South Cloverdale Road project that we've been working on for quite a while. It's revise the federal funding so that a portion of the federal funds are applied to the local agency construction phase. The Fed gives you a certain timeline to do some of that. This project has been delayed, so you can transfer those funds. It's 5,000 on each of those, 5,000 on item 1, 5,000 on item 2. You can apply it to the local construction phase. It's not an increase in the project. It's just a small transfer of funds to beat a deadline. Change order for the contract with Columbia River Contractors. They're the ones that were not installing new guardrail, but replacing existing guardrail that was damaged. We had a contract with them. There's been some additional work that needs to be done in the amount of 11,770. The big portion of that is Castle Rock will be picking up the bill of 7525 for some work in their area. We have a resolution to sell a tax title policy to the city of Longview for public purposes. The total bid is $19,1262 with incurred cost of $314.50. This is a small piece that they're Columbia Heights. They're doing some work on Columbia Heights, and it's a small sliver that we're selling to them. A tax title piece is something we take because they haven't paid. Somebody at some point in time has not paid on it, and we take it back. We send it through, this has been through an auction. Nobody's bid on it. It's kind of an oddball little piece. It just works for their road work, giving them some extra space. So, and we have the ability, since it's been through auction, we have the ability to sell it to another municipality, and we're selling it for what we have into it. So that's what that is. Board correspondence, letter dated 4/22/25 to Elisa Domenico, pointing to the Yale Valley Library District. Letter dated 4/22/25 to Imelda Ochoa, appointing her to the Yale Valley Library District, as of July 9th of 2025. They have a person retiring, and so they met with us and they had these two, and one's just a little later will pick up when it retires. These are both 5-year terms. The first one will expire at the end of July 30/30. They both will expire at the end of July 30/30. Letter dated 4/29/25 to Mara Reese, thanking her for the application to the Yale Valley Library District. Letter dated 4/29/25 to Eric Reese, thanking him for application to the Yale Valley Library District. Letter dated 4/29/25 to Charlotte Stoll Smith, thanking her for the application to the Yale Valley Library District. In affidavit of posting resume for the month of March 2025. And we had vouchers last week in the amount of $3,357,626.29. And that is the consent agenda. If we have any questions on it. Seeing none, I call for a motion.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Last chance for public comments. I'm seeing no hands, so we'll call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We have a couple motion items. Public Works. I don't know who's Sean leading that. Okay.
Good morning, Commissioner Sean Rowe, Public Works. The first item before you today is a sole source procurement for Pano Rapid Detect to detect wildfires at the early stages, enhance emergency response time, and protect both public safety and natural resources. So this is intended to focus on the headquarters landfill for fires that may initiate outside of operating hours. So we have a quick and efficient response time to those items. As an ancillary item, it does monitor a wide area around the tower itself. It's monitored through AI first. Those notifications would be then reviewed by a human, and then from there either respond to the delegated response areas, either ourselves or the local fire department, or both, depending on how we set it up. This is the first part of it. So normally when we do a bid, we would do a bid award after we've received those bids, and then award a contract secondary. Because this is sole source, there is no bid award. This is taking that place. And then we'll come back to the board again for the final contract itself.
And you expect that to be, I think we talked yesterday, in the neighborhood of 40,000 a year, right?
Yeah, we'd expect that
area.
for about $40,000 annually for a 5-year term.
And this system, DNR uses it on their lands.
Yeah.
This detects, I wrote down yesterday, like particles, fire particles in the plume is what it's looking for.
Yeah, so it detects the plumes that come off depending on the size of them, the type of fire. Some of the other people that use this in Washington State are going to be energy companies such as Avista Energy, Pacific Core, PSE, Avista Energy. And then we also have U.S. Forest Service in Washington DNR. And then many other companies throughout Washington, Oregon, California, Colorado, Texas. So it seems to be a growing enterprise for this kind of detection.
In the past 18 months, we've had two, three fires up there.
Savannah Clement, Public Works. So landfill fires occur, I would say regularly, and by that I mean maybe weekly on the fill as we are covering garbage. We're on site oftentimes when it happens. However, we have had instances in the last few years where we've had what we would consider larger fires outside of normal business hours. So not on the open face of the fill where you're going to see a lot of like the lithium batteries that would cause fires, things of that nature. So to answer your question, yes, we've had a couple fires that we would consider outside of business hours that were, scary. And we want to make sure that we are, again, preventing them if we can, and then detecting them as soon as possible and responding as soon as possible. And so this Pano AI system will help us achieve that faster response and detection. I'm kind of a visual person, so just for the audience and members of the community, Pano AI is essentially a camera, a video camera on top of a tower. And so this map up here, it's color coded, but it's got 3 towers that we're working on, or off of, excuse me. And one is very near our landfill, and that's the Signal Peak Tower. Is that correct? And so these large cameras are constantly monitoring the sky, essentially, in the tree lines. And that's how DNR is using them. And that's why we want to capitalize on that use, because they're using it for the same reason. Their reason is forest fire detection, and our reason, is fire detection at the landfill. And so we can work with them and partner and achieve both of those by using this at our tower.
And Savannah, correct me if I'm wrong, but based on that map that you have there, another benefit to it will be that it'll also help with civilian home fires and other within that, within those circles. So
Right.
we're not only using it for the landfill, but by default, the citizens are also going to be able to
Correct.
benefit from that.
Yeah, and emergency response too, in other aspects. And maybe it's not a forest fire, maybe it's a fire at another, larger structure, and that we would have the ability to potentially detect much, much quicker by utilizing this.
Yeah, this is something that we had an emergency management system workshop last week where we went through and audited the county, what we do good and what areas that we are deficient in. And this is one of those areas where I think it's gonna give us a big improvement for really not a lot of money in comparison to what other things are costing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what's your expected day one? When's this thing gonna be in operation?
Yeah, so if the board chooses to approve this today, we would move forward and start working on a contract to execute. And at that point in time, we'd bring it back to the board. Once that's executed, we expect within the next 3 to 6 weeks after that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tim.
So you mentioned the camera. What type of camera is that? Is this like a thermal camera or something?
It's not thermal imaging. That's a great question, because that's what our next probably request to the board will be up here for thermal camera imaging, which will be closer to the fill. This is truly video camera footage.
Yeah, and so to get a little more deep in the technical side, it actually has 2 cameras on the tower. They're 360 turns, so at all times we have a 360 view. They have 30 times optical zoom within them, so you can really zoom in and see what's going on. And then those are all available for real-time view from multiple users to log in on either the phone device or other applications, so they can, if there is a notice, let's say I'm at home at 8 o'clock at night, and I get a notice on my phone, I can open it up, see what's going on there, and then we can start initiating any protocol for staff or fire emergency at that time. Or we can say, oh,
It's a burning, somebody's burning, yeah.
somebody else's stuff.
That's handy. But I'm just curious about, how this would work, being straight video in super cloudy or foggy weather, you mentioned the tree, like measuring at the treetops.
Yeah,
So,
it's much higher than the treetops. Did you want to?
Yeah,
so what are you looking
elaborate?
to detect there exactly with straight video at that level?
So it's going to be the particle plumes coming off the fires themselves. So this is more of a macro, large scale view. And then we'll have also our micro view with the thermals on the fill itself. So it's a 2-prong approach to that response and identification at that side.
Okay.
And could you also speak to the fact that the monitoring system that is being used and how the AI learns what certain plumes are, and so we can not send a 4-alarm fire out for somebody
Right.
burning in their backyard?
Sure, 100%. So yeah, it's AI, it's always learning. It is first initiated by the AI protocol, and then there's a secondary view by person at Pano AI staff themselves. And from there, then it would respond to either ourselves, staff members, or a fire emergency at that time. Depending on the fire type, there are a lot of different types of plumes. If it's a wildfire, say a small backyard burn, we all do, and a few weeks ago myself. And it's able to identify the differences between those. I can't speak to the detail of how it knows. That's beyond me, but that's our understanding at this time.
And when it picks it up, the monitoring immediately calls dispatch,
Mhm.
correct?
Yes, after the AI has notified their staff, they'll make that determination at that
Mhm.
time.
Okay. Any other questions? Good. Would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion for approval of the sole source procurement of the panel rapid detect system.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item 6, the sole source procurement for the panel rapid detect. Last chance for questions. Seeing none, call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So good morning, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. I have the next two items before you. So item number 7 is the Italian Creek Culvert Replacement Project. The bid award, this project will replace the culvert on Italian Creek Road at milepost 1.9. It's a FEMA-funded project for replacement for a damaged culvert after a storm event. We received 7 bids, with the lowest bidder withdrawing their bid based on some errors. So the lowest responsible bidder is DeWitt Construction at a cost of $434,355, which is below, over $100,000 below the engineer's estimate.
Any questions? Okay, I entertain a motion.
I move approval of motion item number 7.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item 7 to DeWitt Construction on the Italian Creek Road culvert replacement. Check for hands real quick. Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So item number 8 is also a bid award. This is the bid award for the Garlock Road Delameter Creek Fish Passage Project, a bid award to Western United Civil Construction. We also received 7 bids for this item. This project will replace the existing box culvert with a 55-foot span steel arch culvert. The bid price was $2,349,120. It is over the engineer's estimate, with a big difference in the concrete price for the foundation.
We've been chatting about this one for a while. now,
Yes.
Different times. Any questions, comments on that particular one? Yeah.
It's okay.
I live in Castle Rock and I go Delameter quite often. I can't picture anywhere where it would really warrant a fish passage under the road. Is it really necessary? I mean, we do have fish in whatever.
So in
Creek that's in
Delameter,
there?
yes, Delameter Creek is a documented fish stream. So
Yes.
yes, they have, and I'm sorry, I didn't look this up before I came, but there are documented, I believe, at least 2 types of salmon within Delameter Creek.
Okay, thank you. Another question I have, and it's not related to this, I'm sorry. I don't mean to spring anything on you, I really don't. But living out in Castle Rock, a lot of times I'll take the frontage road, Pleasant Hill Road, And there is a one-lane culvert thing that's been there for a couple of years. Are you right from?
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, okay. My question is, why didn't they put it to standard, to road standard, instead of just what they did in the first place and not have to redo it at a later time?
So that is a temporary bridge that we have that the county owns. It generally sits at one of our road shops unless we lose a culvert like we did in this location. The replacement project is being funded by FEMA. Yes, this is a FEMA federally funded project. We are at about 75% design, with the intention of to pull that temporary bridge out and replace it with a final bridge. As long as our permitting flows along, we're looking at going to bid this fall.
Okay, so I would have to ask that question to FEMA then, correct? Because,
About the temporary bridge?
right, to me, it's redundancy. If they had done it well the first time, they wouldn't have to go back and do it a second time.
So at the time that the culverts failed, a different group of commissioners made the decision that, yes, they wanted to reopen that roadway instead of leaving it closed until the time that we had the final design complete. So, and since we already own that bridge, the cost was really getting the crane to move it out there and put the foundation in. So
Okay.
that is why that decision was made.
Okay, thank you very much. I was just curious.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I entertain a motion.
I move approval of motion item number 8.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item 8, bid award to Western United Civil Group LLC for the Garlic Road Bridge fish passage replacement. Check for hands. I'm seeing none. Nobody else? Okay, we'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, before we head into public comment this Wednesday, we have Department of Ecology in. The following Wednesday, and that's at 2:30. Following Wednesday at 2:30, we have Community Mediation Center in, and I see / district court update. So have a couple things going on that particular day. Last week we had Department of Wildlife in, and Commissioner Rader did a good job of speaking with him. I'm not sure he got a lot of answers, but I thought I'd have him touch on some of that because I thought it was an interesting meeting to listen to.
Yeah, I just want to start out by saying how I think it's interesting that when we change or use words, how we can add $1.5 million to a project because it's not a culvert, it's a fish passage project. Drives me insane. But last week we had the Fish and Game Department in, and it was the regional officers. And they really didn't have many answers for a lot of the questions that were asked of them, which I understand they're not the ones that make the policies. But the Fish and Game Department has increased the licensing fees for fishing and hunting by 38% this year. And my question to them was, the fees for licensing continue to go up, and we have fewer fishing opportunities, shorter season, fewer hunting opportunities. They're closing down hatcheries. And where do we see this 38%? How do we justify that? Where is that money going? And I knew that they weren't going to be able to answer it, but I thought I'd ask the question anyway. The Fish and Game, the funding for the Fish and Game goes into the general budget. And if you look, the fishing industry in the state of Washington alone brings in over $2 billion a year. And the fact that we don't have enough money to continue to fund hatcheries and to continue the conservation of wildlife and wildlife areas in our state is absolutely it's abhorrent. I mean, it's a derelict of responsibility as far as I'm concerned. But we talked about the SEALs, and what they're doing. One thing that I found interesting that Chairman Dahl caught, in one of the answering of the questions was that they mentioned the management of wolves, in our state, which is interesting because they've, upheld that there aren't any, but there are. We do have wolves in our area on the Mount St. Helens Tree Farm. I've heard of myself. But they, they're talking about, they're also doing, blacktail management, studies, into research the number of blacktail that we have. I ask, are we including hunters in any of these research projects that are going on that citizens are paying for? The response to that was no, which I thought was very interesting because hunters have the best, they have their thumb on where animals are and how many are in each area. Game cams, being in the woods, whatever it is. And I'm pretty sure she said that the majority of that study is done by air, right? Helicopter?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know how you're gonna see a black-tailed deer in a helicopter, but, they were very, very willing to answer whatever questions they had answers for. They did offer to meet with me, outside of this so that I could talk a little bit more about it, but, they did admit that we are closing down hatcheries. We're reducing the number of fish, in rivers, due to them wanting to reclaim the native, strain of fish, which is a ridiculous argument in my mind also. There really is no such thing as a native fish if you have a hatchery on a river. But I thought it was a good conversation and an eye opener that, and this is where I really think that we need citizen involvement in this. The director of the Fish and Game Department is appointed by the governor. It's not an elected position. If you look, the board members of the Fish and Game Department, other states have made this a law that they need to have had a fishing or hunting license for at least 10 years in that state before they're going to even allow them to sit on that board. They can't just be a graduate from one of the local universities and then automatically sit on that board. There needs to be some accountability to the public for the decisions that they make, because these are natural resources that we as citizens in Washington cherish and love and want to hand down to future generations. And the mismanagement of them, particularly with predators, it's just crazy to me. They have, according to what she said, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought she said that they turned over the hoof rot study to WSU. They're no longer really involved with that. They didn't really
Right.
have a report for us on what's going on there, either. But when you look at the management of the predators in our area, it's evident that what the end game is, with regards to the herds in our area, and the same thing with the fishing. And so we really need the community to get involved, to speak out, and to do whatever we can. I know it's an uphill battle. There's a lot of things that are frustrating in our state. But, I've had conversations recently with quite a few people who are like, especially after this last legislative session, that I'm moving to Idaho, I'm moving to Texas, I'm moving to Florida. And though I understand that sentiment, if we continue to run from the problems, we're not going to be able to hide from it. Eventually, it's going to be everywhere. And so my belief is we need to grow where we're planted and do what we can here, because this is a beautiful place to live. It really is. And I'm grateful to live here. And I think that we all need to start, and obviously you guys are involved, but as a whole, the community, we need to realize the valuable resources that we have in the state and not allow bureaucracies to mismanage those and to take them from us. So.
Yeah. It was an interesting conversation because I think Commissioner Rader touched on it. These people at these level were from Region 5, and I think, to me, it's just like the local ecology. They're willing to work with you and do things, but their hands are tied by bureaucratic nonsense above them, and they don't have authorities to do what we would all consider the right thing. I mean, they have, in Region 5 alone, there's 19 enforcement officers in this region. I think it's more of an enforcement thing than a management thing. But anyway, it was an interesting conversation, and we'll have them in again. This time it was just kind of general overview of everything they do. next time we'll try to get more specific, like fist passage or one item type thing and get more depth to it, but anyway, we try to bring you stuff we think might be interesting to you. I don't want to bore you with all kinds of nonsense, but when we do have those type of things, we'll bring it forward. We'll turn it over to you if you have something.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'll carry on with the previous discussion with the Fish and Wildlife. What I would request or suggest is that you put a little notice out ahead of time so we can submit questions, and maybe they can come prepared to answer a few questions specifically, and quit this coming out of the closet not knowing any answers. So maybe we can help you put them on, or have them represent us. That's the real word. Second item regarding wolves is that anyone can go on to the Diamond K student farm up at Republic, Washington, and get pictures of what wolves do to cattle and other that they're battling up there, et cetera. So they may have their head in the sand, but the people and the hunters and the ranchers know what's going on. Unfortunately, there's not much representation. Thirdly is that since I do have property in Eastern Washington, a year ago, Fish and Wildlife sent out a questionnaire asking about grizzlies and wolves in northeastern Washington. And I said, that's only if it's also in western Washington. Grizzly and wolves were more of a habitat in western Washington than in eastern Washington in the old days with the fish and the salmon, et cetera. So I made a statement that is discrimination against the people of eastern Washington when you only pick on eastern Washington. We need to use some of those key words, et cetera, that they want to key in on. So just a couple of things. I'm very sensitive for Fish and Wildlife and what they represent other than just trying to write tickets.
Yeah. That was, like was mentioned when she was talking about they monitor, Commissioner Rader had asked a question on predator animals and how do they, because the bear population is growing, cougar population is growing, and all those are predator to the elk and the other game. And her response was, well, they monitor that and they monitor the bear, the cougar, and the wolves. And I was sitting here thinking, she really said wolves? And so, and I thought Commissioner Rader had, he explained how those packs work. And I thought that was interesting that you can see how they're going to just keep expanding because a pack gets a territory, if I'm remembering right how to explain, and then as ones are, another alpha male wants to be an alpha male, it has to go find its own territory and start a new pack. Is that fairly correct?
Right.
Yeah. So you can see how it'll just keep expanding. It was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, and I would, the other thing that we need to recognize, and I'm sure that a lot of us do, is that science is evolving. It's changing all the time. I mean, it was a scientific fact 300 years ago that you couldn't get in a metal tube and fly across the world. But I'll give you guys an example. We were in Colorado and I was at the Rocky Mountain National Park, and the tour guide there, she made sure that she told us about the bachelor's and the master's that she had in biology, this and all this outdoor stuff and animal ecology. And as we're going along, she starts talking about the fact that the beaver population within the park is down because the coyotes are eating them, and that the size of the elk herd is now starting to diminish a little bit because there's not enough foraging because the elk herd is too big. And so their answer to that is that they're going to introduce wolves into the park. And my question to her was, what's the thought process? Where's the science behind introducing an apex predator of that type that kills indiscriminately? If you don't think wolves are going to kill beavers if they have a chance, that doesn't make any sense. And the elk herd within the park is going to get slaughtered if you introduce wolves with no management. And I just asked her the question. I said, in all the stuff that you learned at school, at what point were hunters involved in that? At what point is mankind involved in that process? And it's not. They try to take us completely out of it, and you can't do that because I asked her, I said, wouldn't it make more sense to issue, if you want to cull 40 elk out of the herd, issue 40 game tags and allow hunters to come in, take out 40 elk, and then you know exactly how many elk are being taken out of the herd. Whereas you introduce a herd of, or a pack of wolves, they're going to kill indiscriminately. They're not going to say, oh, we've reached our limit this month, we're not going to kill another one. So the management of the predators, it makes no sense from a biological standpoint, because they eliminate humans out of the equation. And if you're going to introduce an apex predator of that type, you need to introduce another apex predator that's going to keep that one in check. But that's not what they're doing. And the elk herds and the deer, and they have the same thought process with fish, with the seals and the sea lions. There's just, it's poor management. And God, when he created this world and all those animals, he created us as part of that. And you can't take us out of that equation and expect things not to go out of balance.
What I found, I guess, frustrating that I see happen while I observed all that going on, and Steve kept them busy for a better part of an hour, was, no, if you ask pointed questions, wanting an answer from them, the response is always, well, we didn't make that rule, somebody else did. They're always pointing their finger somewhere else. They're not responsible for it. They're just acting on it. And it's, to me, that's that same old frustrating bureaucratic crap that you end up trying to narrow somebody down and get them focused on solving a problem, and they're busy pointing their finger somewhere else. And I just, yeah, found it very frustrating.
Yeah.
I'd agree with you. I think the Lord wants us to be stewards of the animals. Going back to the coyote issue you were talking about, we have a lot of coyotes where I live. And I know it sounds silly because I have this little chihuahua and to be so upset, but I can't even let her out of the house in the evening. I have to go out with her because we hear the coyotes and we know they're close. And is there any, I mean, they get mice and I know they get their, but they also get, you know, if they get familiar with the the houses and things, they get into our living area. Is there any control of them? I mean, since we're talking about a prey animal, they don't seem to bring the coyote up. And granted, when he's out in the forest, they're fine, but they're not staying out there. They're coming in and causing havoc. With my son over on Sidetown Road, he lives over there, and you know, they have to worry about their chickens. And so anyway, I was just wondering if they mentioned the coyote and any control of coyote.
No, there's really no coyote season. You can hunt them year round with a small game license.
24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Say that again?
You can hunt coyotes whenever you
Oh,
want.
you can't. Oh, well, sorry, we do. But I didn't
I must say
realize.
a 223 caliber for you.
You just described the control right there.
Yeah.
I do want to say, I really appreciate Commissioner Rader's knowledge and understanding of both the fish and the wildlife. His background in those things was great to watch that whole conversation take place.
So when it comes to like the wolves and the big cats, mountain lions, right? These animals, I know my predecessors hunted those things to extinction. That was their plan, and they hunted them all the time. I heard stories growing up about hunting wolves. If they knew a wolf was in the area, they went and killed it right away. I mean, the community would, because they eat people. And, you know, that's the thing that we got going now with the big cats, you know, is that bears, I don't think are an initial problem. Grizzly bear might be, but bears are shy and they pretty much stay away from people. They're smart enough to know that. But the cat is strictly instinct. It sees something moving, it's going to think about taking it down. And I don't want to be the predictor of doom, but you know, we got the cat sightings on Columbia Heights out there and stuff, you know. This is going to be a problem someday. One of them cats is going to drag off a kid. And I hope it isn't one of mine because I got some kids living up there in my family, and um, it's like in a more closer range here, you shouldn't have cats running around like that where people are living, for sure, at the very least. And it's just, we've taken over management, as Commissioner Rader says. Part of that management, we need to be culling these herds of, it's like, say, issue some tags and let the hunters go out and take out the excess. We can't have a naturally stabilized balance of nature here, and have people living there at the same time, not with these big giant predators around. And, the cat's the biggest concern, but wolves are the same way. They'll get on something and there's no stopping them. And, they're bad news, it's like, but the cats worry me more. And really, honestly, our animal control guys should be out tracking down whatever cats we got in here and, around here at least, and eliminating those.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue. When I spoke with him, I was telling him that when I started hunting in 2000 here, I never saw a cougar. I mean, it was probably 15 years before I saw a cougar because they're very difficult to hunt without a dog. And the last 5 years, we've seen cougar in the middle of the day every hunting season. And what's happening with the cougars coming into the general population is that a tom cougar has about an 8.5 to 9 mile radius that he patrols, and he doesn't allow other toms into that area. So if a mother cat has a litter one year and one of those is a tom, that next year it's getting kicked out, right? So if you take the woods, there's only so many 9 mile circles that we're going to have, and those cats keep getting kicked out of those areas and they're getting pushed into urban areas. And to your point, a cougar will stalk you and hunt you, for sure. And when the food source is depleted, it's going to move on to a different area to try to find another food source. And unfortunately, I mean, the number of cougar sightings has increased dramatically within the last 5 to 10 years. And that's because we're not able to hunt them with dogs. And even at that, there are still cougars that are being shot every year because there's so many of them. And with dogs, that's one way to control and to really be able to manage that population. But to your point about bears, actually more people are killed by black bears than they are by grizzlies. And the black bear is actually raising havoc on our fawn birth rate, because in the spring, when the elk calve and the deer have their fawns, those bears are coming out of hibernation and they need protein. They're looking for the easiest thing to fill their bellies, and that is those fawns and those calves. And 2 years ago, I want to say it was 2 years ago, the Fish and Game Department voted on eliminating spring bear season. So that's gonna put even more strain on our elk herd and on our deer population, because we're not managing those predators correctly to keep them in check.
Yeah.
Guess I should just stay sitting up here, but, to your point about using the dogs, that was a good hunting technique, and it put the fear of us into those animals, because the animals, they got a way of knowing that stuff, you know what I mean? You hear the dogs coming, and, I used to go on dog hunting with, some guys that I knew that had them big dogs, and, you had to go for a long time because there wasn't much around. And like you're saying, I grew up here, running around all the woods and stuff all my life, basically. And I never saw a cougar until a few years ago. And that day, I just happened to come nose to nose one on a logging road. And it was huge. You know what I mean? That cat would have easily taken me down from behind. Luckily, I had the wind going my way, so I could be face to face with him. But that cat was bigger than me. And that, like I'm saying, I just think that I'm afraid for the disaster that's coming, because eventually one of them cats is going to drag off a kid, and just, it's going to be a bad thing. And eliminating dog hunting was a big problem with that,
And that's a natural consequence, is when you're not able to go and hunt those animals and help keep them in check. The size of a tom cougar has increased dramatically because they're not being harvested. And so the cats that we have seen, huge. I'm talking, they're mountain lions.
Yeah.
They're not they're lions. They're big animals. Yeah.
Well, one I saw was like, the logging road, and its feet were on the one track and it was sideways in the road, you know, and it's like the feet were on one track, the foot of this one's in the other track. And the tail's off the road over here and its head's off the road over there. That's how big that thing was. I mean, it's gigantic.
Yeah.
But bring back some dog hunting would be the best thing for that.
Yeah, I know that in the state of Oregon, they tried to, in the Blue Mountain Range, they tagged, I want to say it was 140 elk, if I remember the article correctly, and they looked at the survival rate of the calves, and it was a 14% survival rate because of the bear and the cougar in that area. It eliminated 86% of the calves in that season. And their answer was, well, we'll issue more cougar tags and more bear tags. That's not the answer, because a cougar, you can't hunt them without a dog unless you
True.
just accidentally see one. So you can issue 1,000 more tags and it's not going to reduce the population of the cat
Yeah.
unless you change the methodology with regards to how they're harvested.
That used to be a big thing here, you know, those of us that have been around here a long time, dogs were, you know, there was a lot of guys had the dogs and it's fun to do. We need it back.
Well, I think just in the last year or maybe 2 years, wasn't the young lady down in, a jogger down in Portland that, she disappeared and they finally found her. She'd been killed by a cougar.
Yeah.
Don't ever run from a cat. That's like,
See them at all, but that's the problem. They jump on you from behind, break your neck.
Yeah.
Considering that they're raising the fee on the license and the deer tags, the elk tags and everything, and where is that money going, considering there's poor management? And also, you know, raising those prices is discouraging a lot of hunters from even going again. I mean, not everybody can afford all that stuff. But where's all this money going for the raise in fees? Any ideas?
They couldn't answer that. And to your point about it being so expensive, if you look at the influence that animal rights activist groups have on our state, I think the end result is to make it to where you just can't afford to hunt or can't afford to fish.
Right.
And that way they're going to get you, that's how they're going to stop that activity.
So are they just closing the fish hatcheries because there's not enough money coming in, or obviously it's poor management like everything else?
Well, they're saying that's one of the reasons, but the other reason they're saying is because they want to preserve the native strain of salmon within those rivers.
Really?
Commissioner Rader's point to them, we've had fish hatcheries for I don't even know how many years. There's no native native anymore.
I think we're paying for more and more people to be sitting at a desk with supposedly a college degree behind their name, and they're doing research or what they term to be research, and they're not doing field work and actually understanding what's happening. And the costs go up, as he said. It helps narrow down the number of people who can even afford to go hunting. And in that note, I've talked to a number of people who several years ago, before it ever got where it is now, just outright said, I'm done buying licenses. I'm not done hunting, but I'm done paying for it.
Yeah, because I know I came, you know, from my husband's side of the family. Everybody hunted, but they're just giving up. They're, you know, they don't have the spirit for it that they used to have. So.
And
what
I
do
can
you think?
remember when I was a kid, you could get the hunting rules on about 2 pages. It had all the hunting rules on them, statewide rules. Now it's a book. I can't remember, what is it, 120, 130 pages thick.
Yeah, and who's going to read it? I mean,
I do.
completely through,
Yeah,
really.
If you're gonna hunt an
Yeah,
area, you better read it.
Because I mean, and my personal opinion is it's a racket. I mean, if you look at what the reg book says and you look at what the website says and you listen to what they say on their phone message, it's all 3 different things. I mean, so you can't just go by what's on the reg book. You have to actually call every morning to see if any regulations have changed on the river that you're fishing on.
Yeah, and they put that right in the fishing rules. It tells you that you can't live by what's in your hand in the book. You have to check on the regulations to see if they changed them yesterday while you were sleeping.
Yeah.
Well, I know my husband retired from Fish and Wildlife, and that's been, you know, a number of years ago. But he could have, he could tell you even then how the numbers in Olympia got changed to whatever they wanted it to be to look good for the public. But half of them probably didn't even know how to put a worm on a hook, you know, but yet they're sitting behind a desk and getting a good paycheck.
Yeah.
So it's still going on. Thank you.
Anything else? We have Board of Health at 10, so I'll just remind people of that.
Hi, guys.
Yeah.
My name is Glenn Sensenbaugh, and I represent the Faithful Servants Transitional Housing here in our community. I like the hunting stuff. That's really cool. I'm an archer, so I'm into archery a little bit. Fishing, I can't fish. I don't know how to fish. I tried. I don't catch fish. But I'm here because Faithful Servants is a really powerful ministry in our community, and it's changing lives. And it ain't only just changing the lives of the men of the program, it's changing lives outside of our program. And what I mean by that is we're doing an average of 300 to 400 hours of community service every single week to our community where people need help and they don't know where else to go, so they call us and we show up to help. The men of this program have over a 60% success rate in the last year and a half. 60% of the men have successfully moved into their own apartments, working full-time jobs, got their families back together, paying their bills, doing the right things, not putting drugs in their body and being a menace to society. Because we're a 100% faith-based program, we're having issues in getting grants. We have 2 houses that are just right across the street over here. We need more housing. I got a list of about 35, 40 guys that would like to get into our program. We deal with men coming out of prison. I just had to turn down 6 guys trying to find a place to secure themselves for when they get out into the community so they don't go back to their old behaviors because I don't have enough housing. I need houses. Well, having the toughest time is because I ain't gonna stop talking about Jesus Christ. That's my Lord and Savior. That's what changed me. That's what's changing the lives of these men over here. And because of that, we're running into issues. We need some help. We want to help our community. We're doing some amazing stuff with our community. The ministry's been up and running since 2011 here in our community. And we just need some help, and we just don't know what to do with it because we don't know where to get the help from. With a success rate of 60+%, it would seem like some funding would be more advocated to go to a faith-based program than something with a 2% success rate of other programs that our community is taking millions and millions of our taxpayers' money to try to help fund these places. I don't know what to do. I wish I did. I wish I had an answer for it. I'm kind of hoping maybe you guys can point us in some directions. We have rented 2 houses from the city of Kelso before. Maybe if you guys have some houses, this way maybe we can rent them from you. We're not asking for handouts. We're just asking for ways to make a better community, and we need some help. We want to help more people, and the only way to do that is for the community to step up and say, hey, this is what we can offer with you guys with what we're offering our community. So,
A question. So I know that Faithful Servants has been around for a while, and there was a house for women as well. And is that still something that's going to continue, or?
we do want to open up another female house. We ran into some financial issues with the female house that we had up and running, so we closed it down and turned into a men's program. So this way we can try to raise some more finances, so this way later down the road that we can open another female housing program. But right now, we got 2 houses and we just need more. This way we can build up the funds. With the way the ministry runs, about 40% of the men right now are paying the shares of the housing. So 60% are new or just coming out of incarceration or just coming out of treatment facilities and stuff like that. So we got about 40% that are paying, 60% that ain't. And as that 40% are transitioning into their own places, that 60%, about 20% of them don't make it. The other 40% step into that position. And that's how we're funding the houses. We're not making anything off of it. We're just making enough to support our move jobs, to support the things that are going on, to try to help them in toilet paper, shampoo, toothpaste, toothbrush, rent, water, garbage, sewage. If you guys live in Kelso, you know how high the water bills are. Our water bill at our big house is $1,500 a month. I mean, $1,500 every 2 months. It's just, it's crazy. And, yeah.
I do want to say something positive about faithful servants. I've used them in the past, and just this past Friday, I think about 6 or 7, we got to come out to our property and brought a huge U-Haul and helped us for 2 hours empty the shop and take all that junk to the dump. And my husband and I could not have done that without their help. So I'm very grateful that we couldn't hire anybody, but we can certainly pay dump fees and give a donation to faithful servants because we believe in the ministry.
And that's one of, we'll get 5, 6 move jobs a week to where elderly are moving and stuff like that. And nobody else in the community wants to help. They call us, we go and help. We're trying to find ways right now. We got some elderly couples that are having roof issues. They don't know where to go to get help. They live on Social Security and they don't have anything. We'll show up and do the work. We're just trying to find the funds to get them a new roof and the materials for it. We do lawn cleanups, we do property cleanups, we build little ramps in case somebody needs something on their front porch. I mean, we'll do anything and everything for our community because so many of us have taken so much from our community through our addictions and stuff. It's time to give back, and we're giving back, and we're doing everything we can to possibly help. We just need some help. And what that would be was we need more housing. The minute of the program can help support the ministry once we get the houses up and running. We need properties, we need grants that we're allowed to talk about Jesus, that can be accepted, because we're not going to stop talking about Christ. We're just going to keep on moving forward, but we could use some assistance, financial assistance, housing.
What's your name?
My name is Glenn Sensenbaugh. I'm the executive director of the program.
Glenn?
Yep.
A lot of, any of that type of stuff, a lot of times starts with our human health services and yesterday, we actually sit and we are going to schedule a workshop and talk over some of the things that are available through, we get opioid funds, we get different type of funds. So I think some of that information may come up and we haven't scheduled that workshop, but I'd be more than happy to make sure you guys knew about it so you could kind of hear from the horse's mouth as to what's out there and how you go about it.
Okay. Any other questions, guys?
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? We will adjourn this one and then we'll start Board of Health here real quick. Okay. Okay. Welcome to the Board of Health meeting. Chairman Kelly is out this week, so you're stuck with me. When we put this agenda together, I tried to keep it fairly light. We've had a lot of conversation in the past months on suicides and different things, and the 988 number keeps coming up, and Great Rivers Behavioral Health was in and chatted with us about the coming 988 and their current line and stuff, and I thought it'd be good information for you to hear as to what they're working on. So we reached out to Trinidad, and he was gracious enough to come in today and kind of talk over what they talked about with us and what their plans are and how we can support their plans. We sent a letter of recommendation to support that, and maybe there's something that the public can do also. So if you want to, however many want to get it to Mike's, we'll turn over and let you. We got two over there and we have one here. Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners and Board of Health. Thank you for having us. My name is Trinidad Medina. I'm the Chief Executive Director with Great Rivers Behavioral Health Administrative Service Organization. We are charged with ensuring that our 5-county region has access to crisis services, which includes a regional crisis line, mobile crisis response, boots on the ground out, being dispatched out into the community, and designated crisis responders, which are the folks that can go out and involuntarily detain individuals in the community. Okay, I move that up. Sorry about that. So we also administer other funding, federal block grant funding, and operationalize legislatively directed programs like the Recovery Navigator program. So our 5-county region includes Cowlitz, Wahkiakum, Pacific, Grays Harbor, and Lewis counties. So we're here today to share some information with you all about our regional crisis line change that just recently occurred, and some information, and share some information related to 988 and the future of crisis services in Washington State. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to we do have a slide deck, so I don't know if we could pull that up. And I think we're on slide 2 now. And what we'll do is we'll just go down and introduce ourselves. And we have a team here from 3 different organizations. So Andy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Mandy Moore, and I'm part of the clinical team at Great Rivers BHASO.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Joe Avalos. I'm the Executive Director for Olympic Health and Recovery Services, and we are the not-for-profit behavioral health agency that just took over the Great Rivers Regional Crisis Line. So thank you for having us.
Good morning. My name is Drew McDaniel, and I am the CEO for Columbia Wellness. Can I jump in?
Yep, just jump right in.
Okay, here we go. So Columbia Wellness has been part of our community for just over 76 years. It began as a service for children and families in the 70s and 80s as state hospitals opened their doors and sent chronically mentally ill individuals back to the communities. We found a lot of them resided on the streets and were in need of care. So Columbia Wellness expanded to serve all populations of individuals with behavioral health illness. Going back in time, 1974, the federal government said to the states, find a way to provide for the emergent behavioral health needs of your citizens. Washington State, like all states, looked around the nation, found a model in Illinois, which they thought was a good model. Brought it back, made some modifications, and since 1974, that model has included a couple of different components that you've heard Trinidad speak of. One of them being a crisis hotline, 24-hour-a-day crisis hotline. Other being boots on the ground, mobile crisis teams that can go out and provide support and intervention. And then thirdly, groups that can go out and, if necessary, suspend civil liberties and place someone in a hospital for care for potential danger to self, others, or what's called grave disability. Columbia Wellness, since 1974, has maintained the crisis hotline and has maintained the boots on the ground. For many years, we were also the entity that went out and placed individuals in care against their will if necessary. But recently, there have been some changes at the state level regarding the crisis delivery system across our great state. And Columbia Wellness was at a crossroad. Do we become a 988 hub, which we'll be talking about 988 here today, and accept all that comes with that, which includes taking calls from outside of our region? Or do we focus on our region and put boots on the ground and be there when our community needs us? And we felt that the latter was our preferred route. We were born in Cowlitz County. We've expanded to our 5-county family region. We want to stay right here and do the best we can in our community. So we reached out to the ASO and to our community partners and said, can we look at how the system is redesigning itself and how we can take control of that in our region to the best extent possible to provide the best care? So we are here to do the job and do it alongside other professionals who have the best interest of our citizens always at heart.
Thank you, Drew. Next slide, please. So transition of the Behavioral Health Regional Crisis Line took place on April 1st. So it hasn't even been a full month since Olympic Health and Recovery Services has began taking calls as the call operators in our region. As Drew pointed out, Columbia Wellness had done a fantastic job for a long time, and we really appreciate the service to the community. And with the notice, we re-procured the service and selected Olympic Health and Recovery Services, who was already familiar with our region. Great Rivers believes in, building on what we already have and utilizing the knowledge about our region, our rural region, to its fullest extent. And Olympic Health and Recovery Services began taking calls April 1st. We tested it that morning. I called at 9 a.m. and someone from Olympic Health and Recovery Services answered the phone. So we're excited to have a new chapter in our regional crisis line with Olympic Health and Recovery Services being that provider. And I'd like to hand it over to Joe for some information about Olympic Health and Recovery Services.
Thank you, Trinidad. And so, yes, we have been working in the Great Rivers region since 2018 when we assumed the designated crisis responder services. So these are the individuals that Drew mentioned that can detain somebody if they are a danger to self or others, or if they're gravely disabled due to their behavioral health condition. And so we're very familiar with the hospitals, law enforcement, all of the resources, the crisis teams all throughout the Great Rivers region. And, have been working very, for the last 7 years to really familiarize ourselves with the unique nature of each of the counties in the Great Rivers region. So we are very tied to that. And, obviously working very closely with Drew's team and the other crisis responders with the regional crisis line when Columbia Wellness decided to focus on mobile crisis teams. And I know you're going to talk about endorsed teams a little bit later. Of course, we absolutely support that. But our biggest concern, I guess, is about what's coming on a national trend with 988 and the what may happen in making this more of a statewide or national service and potentially losing the regional aspect and familiarization that is so necessary in every county in the Great Rivers region. We'd also been providing regional crisis line services in Thurston Mason counties. So we saw this as an opportunity to, continue to provide regionalized service, and while at the same time putting ourselves in the position to potentially become a 988 hub. As we're going to talk about a little bit later, that is coming open, I believe next week? And so we've gone through all of the processes to be able to put ourselves in a position to become a 988 hub for the Thurston Mason and Great Rivers region, keeping more as regional and local control and influence on how we dispatch mobile crisis, how we refer to the local resources, hospitals, law enforcement, and just try and keep it as regional as we can. Are you going to talk about VOA later? Okay. I think we're going to talk a little bit later about where 988 stands now, but as of next week, we'll be throwing our hat in the ring to become a 988 provider for the region. So, and I do want to thank you especially for your letter of support in our attempt to do that. So
That's what I was going to say. That was our letter of support.
Yep.
We wanted to keep it regional here
Absolutely.
instead of somebody in Colorado or somebody else
That's right.
answering the phone.
That's right. And I do want to say all of our staff are, they're local. They're from Cowlitz County. They are from Lewis County. We try and hire as local as possible. Just they're staff that know their area as needed. So happy to answer any questions.
I thought you talked about when you tested and you called and you got a live person. I thought the demonstration of the call to 988 where you got a phone tree versus the demonstration to our local crisis line number where you actually, a person answered the phone and was ready to talk to you. That was, to me, that was pretty huge.
Yeah. So that was extremely important to us. And again, a huge shout out to Drew's team for being able to answer all the calls and most of the calls, like 99%, 98 to 99% of the time within 3 rings. So that's a huge achievement that we wouldn't see at a more global level with 988 being a national company or, an operator that from a different state. So we're just very proud of that. And one of the only ASOs that has that. We did implement one change where there's just a notice that an individual has called our line. So it says you've called the Great Rivers Regional Crisis Line, and then someone answers. But there is no phone tree. There's nothing that anyone has to press 1 or 2 or 3 or anything like that. So we're very proud of that in our service array.
All right, so over these next several slides, I'm going to briefly touch on our current crisis system design and then move into future state alignment of crisis services with 988. So within the current crisis system design, the help seeker, there is overlap for crisis services for the help seeker. They can call either the regional crisis line or 988 suicide and crisis lifeline. And both services will provide a telephone crisis intervention. If 988 deems an outreach is indicated, 988 will then contact the regional crisis line to dispatch a local mobile crisis team. And so, again, both services do provide those de-escalation services. However, like we said, the regional crisis line is local, it's community-based, whereas 988, we currently contract with Volunteers of America. They're located in Everett. They oversee the Great Rivers region as well as 27 other counties. And so again, yes, we're really advocating for OHRS to be that potential 4th hub. There are currently 3 988 hubs throughout the state, and OHRS, yes, is going to be applying for that 4th hub position coming up next week. Next slide. So Bill 1477 is concerned with the crisis system redesign in alignment with 988. And last fall, the Department of Health and Healthcare Authority released a joint policy statement to more clearly outline what this alignment with 988 will look like. So within the policy statement, they identified that 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline will become the primary entry point for crisis services for the public. So again, 988 is for the help seeker. So professionals like emergency department social workers, first responders, and community behavioral health professionals will still be able to contact the regional crisis line directly for that professional consultation or for dispatch of a mobile crisis team in the community. So essentially, the regional crisis line will be shifting their focus to the deployment of in-person responses and consultation for professionals. And the help seekers who used to call the regional crisis line will be encouraged to call 988 as that primary front door for crisis support.
And I personally like the idea of calling 988. I mean, that's an easy number that we all can remember, right? I don't know if you remember the 1-800, that number that was listed up there, but that's not an easy number to remember unless you have it saved in your phone. You have to go find it, or you have to be familiar with it, or somebody needs to assist you with that. So the future state of 988 and how services are dispatched, it makes sense for our community members, you all, to just pick up the phone and dial 988, similar to what we do with 911. It makes sense. It's just an easier number, and I think that will improve access to services as well.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to.
I don't disagree with that. I do want to point out on the old number, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought last time you mentioned like 4,000 calls a month. Is that correct? So even on the more difficult number, there's a pretty big demand out there in the 5-county area.
Right. Yeah, our call center, on average had approximately 4,000 calls a month. That is a large volume. And it was important for us as through this transition not to change that number. So we kept that number. That's the same number that's been in place for many years. And those calls are just now going to Olympic Health and Recovery Services. So yeah, we're looking forward to analyzing the data after this first month of operations and look at where we can continue to make improvements to the system.
Trinidad, if we become the regional hub for the 988, that's going to increase the call volume, because I think you mentioned another couple of counties that would be involved in that. Are we still looking to provide, I'm assuming the same service where they're going to get a person, not a phone tree? And what are we doing to accommodate for that increased volume?
So currently, and I think the last set of calls that we recorded from the 988 line for March and February was right around 400 calls a month. 9 of which got transferred to our regional crisis line. So the volume isn't quite there yet. So with 988 being marketed more to the community, being that easy phone number to remember for people to call, we'll see that volume increase. I think that having a vertically integrated system with our regional crisis line and 988, providing that service, they'll be able to provide more streamlined dispatches out into the community when necessary. It will be 2 separate staff. Department of Health is the contract holder for the 988 hubs, so they contract out that service. That will not go through the ASO at this time. Department of Health will be the entity responsible for overseeing that. And at this time, we, as ASOs, have an opportunity to make a recommendation and participate in work groups with Department of Health and the Healthcare Authority. But the ultimate decision makers around how that contract is and what those expectations are is Department of Health. So I think to our benefit, we'll have an ability to have a vertically integrated system if Olympic Health and Recovery Services is successful in that application process.
And that's the State Department of Health?
Yes, Washington State Department of Health.
I'm sure they're going to fund that properly. right? I'm sure the state will adequately fund that, and not require counties to do it.
Yeah, well, a lot of the 988 funding comes from a cell phone tax. We are all currently being taxed, 988 tax. So if you look at your cell phone bill, you will see that tax. All of that tax revenue is used to fund the 988 hubs and some mobile crisis response.
I believe the current 988 hubs outside of VOA are vertically integrated with regional crisis lines as well.
Yeah, there are there's 10 ASO regions in the state of Washington, and most of them are already vertically integrated. Great Rivers and Thurston Mason is unique at this time, where we have a different regional crisis line operator than the 988 hub operators.
So Bill 6251 was also concerned with crisis system redesign. And within that bill, they tasked the ASOs with convening stakeholders throughout the region to talk about our regional dispatch protocols and bring in 988 to develop and formalize protocols in alignment with this future state alignment with 988. So throughout that work group, we created the 988 and regional crisis line transition timeline for 2025. And I'm not going to touch on all the points on here. We did already cover some of them. The first one is that our new regional crisis line provider, OHRS, became operational on April 1st. And then next week, at the end of Q2, the 988 hub applications will open. So as it was mentioned before, 988 receives around 300 to 400 calls per month for our region, whereas the regional crisis line receives around 3,500 to 4,000 calls a month. So as you can see in the timeline, we are going to start ramping up 988 community education closer to the beginning of Q4 of this year to ensure that 988 hubs will be able to handle that additional call volume once 988 hub designation is complete by the end of the year. So beginning in 2026, we should have our 4th hub designated for the state. Next, do you want to add something else?
Yeah, I'd like to. Well, once again, thank you for your letter of support. We do have another version of that letter of support that we can share out for community partners who would also like to support Olympic Health and Recovery Services application. We could include that in the meeting documents, so save it to your records so that the community can.
So if the community wanted to support this idea, you have a version that they could submit to this.
Exactly, yes.
Also, okay.
Yes, and I'd like to take this opportunity to also kind of just share an example of why it's important for our local dispatching team or local crisis teams to provide that full array of service, the regional crisis line, mobile crisis response, and DCR services. And I'd like to ask Drew to share an example of a case that was eye-opening when I first heard it. Drew?
Certainly. So Columbia Wellness, as I said, has been in our community about 76 years. I'm the old guy there. I've been there almost 31 years. And I've had the opportunity to run most all of the programs except our medical team, not that qualified. But when I ran the crisis team, one of my favorite, I guess you can call it patients, consumers, person in need, was an older lady who called us whenever she was out of milk. And you know, as clinicians, we understand the importance of trauma-informed care and how different people respond to trauma and how you can help them cope and adjust with that trauma. We firmly believe in regionally informed care, culturally informed care. Those are truths, realities that we deal with, especially in small rural communities. And so when she called and she was out of milk, we all put together our dollars and our quarters and went and got her 3 or 4 gallons of milk and took it to her home. Made sure she was okay. The story behind the story was that this individual suffered from extreme gastrointestinal reflux. Whenever she had that, milk was her go-to. Without the milk, it got worse. It increased in severity. That triggered anxiety. The anxiety triggered a psychosis. Her official diagnosis was schizophrenia, paranoid type with psychotic features. She had been on the psychiatric unit many times at Peace Health. She had been at Western State Hospital many times, trying to recompensate from a level of severe deterioration. So if going to get a few gallons of milk was going to help her, doggone it, that's what we're going to do. And I look at that example, and as you've heard, when the state opens the procurement process for that 4th potential hub, 988 is a national, it is a federal program. There are hubs all across the United States. There's hubs in Colorado. They're one of the largest, and they're quite interested in moving into Washington. There's hubs in New York. I always think of the salsa commercial. New York City. I can just imagine someone from our community getting someone from New York City saying, I'm out of milk. I want people to define their own crisis. We all have that right. And in our community, let's keep the service regional, cultural, local as much as possible, because we can look out for one another, and that's important to us.
Thank you for sharing that story, Drew.
All right, so moving on, we'll briefly talk about when you would call 988, the regional crisis line. And then I'd like to touch on our mobile crisis response endorsement program. And so the question is, when would you call 988? And the answer is when you or someone you care about is seeking help for a behavioral health emergency. So again, 988 is for the help seeker. And the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline will be that primary entry point for the public. So 988 counselors are skilled in de-escalation and crisis support, and they'll be able to work with the help seeker to identify their needs or the need for dispatch for a local mobile crisis team to go out and provide some additional in-person support. Next slide. As Trinidad mentioned earlier, 988 is an easy to remember number. And the goal of 988 is to provide immediate crisis stabilizing care in the least intrusive manner possible. Something that community members have shared is that they really appreciate the anonymity with 988. You don't have to give a lot of personal information to talk about your presenting issue, the crisis that you're currently experiencing. And so for the majority of people who are calling in for support, 988 will be able to provide the appropriate intervention. However, again, if there is a presenting need, 988 does connect with our mobile crisis, with our regional crisis line, so that our regional crisis line can dispatch a mobile crisis team to the person in need. And another goal of 988, I think, is to divert some of those behavioral health crisis calls away from 911, so that 911 can also be responding to more appropriate calls. Next slide. So again, an individual will still call 911 when there is the need for immediate containment. And this is when an individual is perceiving risk or danger to their self, their property, or their environment, or when there is any medical emergency, or really anytime the caller believes an urgent response by law enforcement or emergency medical professionals is needed. So the 911 State Coordination Office is also working with 988 to develop protocols for 911 dispatchers to follow, so that if they believe that there's a behavioral health crisis happening, that they can call either 988 or the regional crisis line for that in-person support. Next slide. So again, the regional crisis line will be shifting their focus from being that first line of intervention for the person in need, for the help seeker, to being more of a professional consultation line. So the line should be used for community professionals seeking consultation, those entities seeking a DCR evaluation, individuals who are currently receiving crisis stabilization services. And this will leave 988 call clinicians more available to help seekers in emergent need who need that immediate support over the phone. And the regional crisis line number, however, is not changing. And so moving forward, as far as we can tell, we're able to keep the 1-800-803-8833 number. And so in the event that an individual does happen to call the regional crisis line instead of 988, they won't be turned away. So there's still a no wrong door policy. We want to be able to serve the individual as quickly as possible. And that doesn't mean connecting them back to 988 if they just happen to call the wrong number. Next slide. So again, who should be calling the regional crisis line? And these will be professionals like 911 and 988. First responders, law enforcement and corrections officers, hospitals and medical providers, behavioral health providers, schools, and those individuals who are currently receiving crisis stabilization services through a mobile crisis team. Next slide. So before I move into future state alignment, quick snapshot there, I wanted to touch on the Mobile Crisis Response Endorsement Program. So Bill 1134 passed in 2023 in response to the need for more accessible and effective behavioral health emergency services within our state. This also created the language for the endorsement standards for our crisis teams. So the goal of this program is to enhance the statewide behavioral health crisis response system and ensure individuals experiencing a crisis have quick and easy access to help in their regions. So this endorsement for our crisis teams is a voluntary credential that, again, our crisis teams or community-based crisis teams may obtain. And our crisis teams have to meet specific response times as well as staffing criteria to maintain endorsement with the state. And there are, I believe, 8 teams that applied with the state to be an endorsed team. And we have 2 of those 8 in our region. One of them being Columbia Wellness here, and the other one as Cascade Community Healthcare in Lewis County. And so both teams have met the initial compliance requirements, which is great, with the goal of becoming fully endorsed by July 1st of 2025. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else to that.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. So as the ASO for our region, it was important for us to engage in discussions early on with our mobile crisis teams to really help facilitate the process of getting endorsed. Columbia Wellness has done a fantastic job meeting all the requirements, sending in policies and procedures, and working with us as we were learning about the endorsement requirements and what the healthcare authority was going to require of us. We're still working on this process, but we're very excited that Columbia Wellness was able to achieve that initial approval. And I'd like to hand it over to Drew if there's anything you'd like to add about the work that you're doing and kind of where you're at. But yeah, for Great Rivers, we are in full support of that endorsement and continue working with Columbia Wellness to ensure that they are endorsed by July.
So Columbia Wellness is part of a statewide behavioral health group that does our best to be aware of legislation that's coming and how to influence it to meet our community needs. And I remember attending one of those meetings about 6 months ago. And the hot topic was, are you going to become an endorsed mobile crisis team? And I remember saying, yeah, that's the highest level. We want to go for that. And I remember other organizations defending why they couldn't become one. And I found that odd. If you look at the endorsed level, they're basically, if you look at a stool with the 3 legs, Endorsed teams have more training. They have higher levels of training than other community-based mobile crisis teams. Why do you need more training? Well, to do a better job. Heck yeah, we're going to get more training. Number two, they have increased staffing levels to include certified peer counselors who can help. I remember I asked one a substance use peer counselor one time, what is your role? And he said, look at the docs over there. He goes, when they detox them from the med or the drug, my job is to detox them from the lifestyle. I thought that was a beautiful statement. Let's have certified peer counselors come in and be a part of this mobile crisis team. That's the second leg, the staffing model. The third is, as you've heard, is to be able to get out into the community. The standard that endorsed teams must meet this year is from the call request to the moment we're out the door is 20 minutes or less. In 26, it's going to go to 15 minutes or less. Currently, while triaging 4,000 calls, my team gets out within 35 minutes or less. You take away those 4,000 calls and give them to a community partner, we can get out the door within 20 minutes or less. So we decided, why not? That is our standard. It's a standard, again, that our communities deserve, our people deserve, our providers deserve. When 911 is standing there with a person on the side of the street that's in a behavioral health crisis, get your team out to be helpful and get them out quickly. And that is the role of the endorsed team. And we're glad that we are going to be one of them.
Thank you. And so the goal with this crisis system redesign for the state is to really fine tune the role of each program and ensure that there is a specific scope that they're falling within. And so within the future state alignment, the help seeker will be calling 988 for that initial crisis intervention. And 988 will do their best to de-escalate the situation and provide support. Again, however, if an in-person response is needed, they'll be able to call the regional crisis line, who can then dispatch a local mobile crisis team to the area. So again, 988 will be used for that primary crisis intervention. Then you have the regional crisis line, who will do the professional consultation or deployment of a mobile crisis team. And then the mobile crisis teams, who are going to be able to respond faster and have more wraparound support for individuals, including those certified peers. And so hopefully this will help streamline our services and make our crisis services more effective throughout the region. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Trinidad.
Thank you, Mandy. Next slide, please. Just some key organizations within our behavioral health crisis network. We as the ASO provide the funding and oversight for the services. Columbia Wellness is the boots on the ground service provider, responding out into the community in Grace Harbor, Cowlitz, and Wahkiakum counties. Cascade Community Healthcare is our boots on the ground mobile crisis team responding in Lewis County. Olympic Health and Recovery Services is the designated crisis responder organization that goes out throughout all of our 5 counties. So they're already familiar with the terrain and landscape of our beautiful region. And then Willapa Behavioral Health is in Pacific County. So they are the boots on the ground. So if you're ever in Pacific County, out on the beach or visiting family and friends out there, Willapa Behavioral Health is there if anyone's in crisis. And then our 988 operator, which is currently operated by Volunteers of America, again, based out of Everett and contracted directly with the Washington State Department of Health, which again, we're hoping that Olympic Health and Recovery Services is that organization. Next slide, please. And just some contact information for you all. If you'd like to ask more questions or think about questions later, we're happy to take any of the questions via email or phone call. And I think that concludes our slides. I think we have one more just to thank you all very much for your time. And we're happy to take questions now if you have them.
Appreciate you coming.
Trinidad, could you just real quickly explain to everybody what an ASO is, what that stands for?
An ASO, it's an administrative service organization. We are charged with ensuring that that our region, the Great Rivers region, a 5-county region, has a behavioral health crisis network. We have operationalized other legislatively directed programs like the Recovery Navigator program and the Youth Navigator program, which just got implemented in Cowlitz County ahead of schedule and doing well. And we also administer federal block grant dollars for behavioral health services.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that with the Navigator programs, I spoke to a couple law enforcement last week at the meeting that we had, and a lot of them were very grateful and they really like that program for their municipalities.
Yeah, that's been a very successful program. Operationalizing it has taken some time, but we've gotten to the point where we have now a great community partner providing the service, Destination Hope and Recovery Services, out in the community with outreach and engagement workers that really assist alongside law enforcement with individuals with substance use disorder needs.
Well, first of all, I think it's totally awesome. And I really appreciate what you're offering the community. I have two questions does it have to be a crisis like right now, if it's not taken care of, there's going to be a major problem? It has to be an immediate problem and not a long-term, and I'll get to why in a minute. And also, do you have to be the one that needs the help, or you're a person that you're involved with, I guess? The reason being, and I need to ask this, we have a very well-known person in Castle Rock, bless his heart. He sleeps on the corner of our freeway entrance constantly, no matter what the weather. We have offered him help. Our church has offered him help. Remember when we had this tremendous storm, he was out there. And he won't come in. Now, you made the mention of involuntary, but we're not related. He's not a friend. I mean, can I call? I mean, is this considered a crisis?
I'll start and then I think I think that would totally be appropriate to call the regional crisis line for that, to share that concern. We speak to family members all the time, concerned citizens, and then it's our job on our end to work with Drew's team. Hey, this is a call that we got. What do you think? Is this somebody that you know, and somebody that your mobile crisis team might want to go and see? And then Drew would.
Absolutely. I've always trained my team with the following example. That there's a continuum of care from the least intrusive to the most. And I think we all acknowledge this with ourselves. If I go see my doctor and I say, hey, Dr. Canada, I've had some headaches. Can you help me? And she gets on her phone and says, yeah, I need to schedule brain surgery stat. I'm probably going to pass out. And when I wake up, think, seriously, you're just going to go there first? How about some test or a pill or something? Yeah. We all deserve this. So the very least intrusive intervention is to get some boots on the ground, some collaboration, talk with the community, talk with the concerned persons calling, talk with the patient, see what we can do to help. And many times that approach of how can we help you will be effective. Sometimes it won't. And that leads us to a more intrusive intervention. And that more intrusive intervention can go all the way up to the designated crisis responder that can remove or suspend civil liberties and place a person in a hospital for care. I will say that there is a frustrating point for those who care, for communities, and for those who implement the law. The Involuntary Treatment Act law does not give us the authority to dictate quality of life to someone.
Oh.
And that can be hard, especially when the person you're calling about is someone you know and care about. The law says that there must be an element of danger and risk. And so danger and risk will be a key element that Joe's team will be looking at. But we look at that again as the last resort. There's a menu of options that we can choose, or at least try to choose from before we ever get there. So yes, that would be a beautifully appropriate call to make.
Oh, thank you so much, because we've watched him in the absolute worst weather.
Mhm.
Then you can, I mean, we've had some pretty, and he's there sleeping on the corner. And we've, you know, please come, we have beds, will not. And we've, you know, people have given him food. And the last downpour that we had, somebody, he did take an umbrella, and that was, but then he chucked it somewhere. I saw him walking over the Cowlitz Bridge in Castle Rock today, and he had his blanket. He must have gotten irritated because he sometimes goes to Four Corners. He has his big blanket on. He was trudging across the bridge. You know, I mean, this man, I can't describe how forlorn he looks. And knowing he doesn't go anywhere but this cement, even in the coldest situation that we had, that was his bed, and it just tears you apart. So thank you. I will call.
I do have a question with regards to the suspension of civil liberties. Does the affected individual, is there any due process that they get? Because I would imagine that sometimes timing is an issue. Is there a warrant that has to be issued, or does that legislation just allow you to take it and do what you have to do?
I'll start.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So again, this was part of the model that came from Illinois that was modified to Washington State. Every state will have a different model. But in our model, there are two groups of individuals who have been given the authority to suspend civil liberties. Now let's look at that phrase. People have died to protect our rights and our civil liberties. So the first thing is that the DCRs must take this very seriously. We have rights in our world. Wonderful. Hallelujah. I'm glad we do. The two entities that can go in and temporarily suspend civil liberties and say to a person, you cannot go where you want to go. You cannot walk away. You cannot leave. You will be taken and placed. Are peace officers and designated crisis responders, DCRs. That's it. Those are the two entities. And the DCR's responsibility is to take all available information, lay eyes on, do what they can to see, is this absolutely necessary? Or do we have less restrictive options? Less restrictive meaning less restrictive than involuntary inpatient care. But if a person is detained by the DCR, there is a clock that starts ticking. And if the treating physician wants to continue holding them for involuntary care, then a superior court judge gets involved. There is a defense attorney assigned, a prosecuting attorney assigned. There's a court clerk that oversees that process. There's an official hearing that takes place, and an official court-ordered finding of fact as a result of that. So there is judicial oversight, and the state of Washington ensures that. If you go to state hospitals across the United States, most of them have graveyards attached. It's unfortunate, but up until the 80s or 90s, if you ended up in a state hospital, you could almost rest assured you were going to stay there. And many people died in state hospital care because of old age. And they're buried in those grave sites. The state of Washington wanted to ensure that that would never happen. And so there is regular judicial oversight with hearings.
Could you use the word peace officer? Could you define that? Because in my mind, there is a difference between law enforcement and a peace officer based on how they view their role and enforcing that role. So is there a difference can you define what a peace officer is and what you, with your explanation there?
Yeah, go ahead. I think you mean.
So Washington State has two definitions. There's a limited authority and a full authority peace officer. The state has not made a difference or a differential decision as to whether you can be limited authority or full authority that I'm aware of. Do you know anything to the alternative? So anybody that the state has designated or ordained as limited authority peace officer or full authority peace officer can take a person into custody. Now, if you ask me more than that, I can't answer it.
And I think I'll just add that the DCR holder, the detainment is up to 5 days, not including weekends. But at any point during that placement, so there are a lot of steps that have to be involved in order for somebody to officially be detained or placed. The facility where they're placed, whether that's St. John's or Telecare or any facility that's licensed to do that, they can release that hold at any point. And so
Based on their own assessment?
based on their own assessment and how they feel the patient is doing. So while there is the court process that occurs after that, after those 5 days, I don't know the numbers for Great Rivers, but I would say it's probably close to 40 to 50% that don't ever make it to a court hearing. They're released within those 5 days, 5 to 7 days or so.
So I was listening for trying to hear a definitive answer of, is every law enforcement officer a peace officer?
I would, at this point, if you're including, for example, Department of Corrections, a corrections officer, DOC officer, they are not. They're typically assigned to a local police department or a county sheriff department. Those are the two that historically we've always worked with. So Cowlitz County Sheriffs, Longview, Kelso, Kalama, Woodland, Castle Rock.
Okay.
I just find it interesting that you use the word peace officer, not law enforcement, because in my mind, like I said, depending on how they execute their role and how they view their role, there is a difference to me.
There is, and the peace officer language is directly from the revised code of Washington, the 7105 and 134. It does not refer to them as law enforcement officers. It does designate as peace officer. And when you look at the definition, it's the limited or full authority.
Okay. Any other questions from board out here?
You mentioned the 3 key words, all available information. So throughout, whether it's city, state, county, whatever the region is, there's new cases, but many of them are repeat cases. People are looking for information on a repeat. So how is that information gathered and how is that information available to service agencies or even to family or whatever?
Do you mean on callers that are repeat callers and potentially folks that we would need to see multiple times? That happens quite a bit. And that actually speaks to, I think, the justification for vertical integration between the 988 provider and the regional crisis line. You're right. There are a lot of repeat callers. There are a lot of callers that call either 988 or the regional crisis line for either for their family members that we need to see multiple times or that we need to refer to Drew's teams multiple times. The 988 and RCL call takers who are in the best case scenario vertically integrated will have access to the information that we've got in our electronic health record about what has occurred in previous call attempts or how many times we've sent out mobile crisis team or had to call 911. All that history will be present to help in determining what's the least restrictive option to help this person get to where they need to be next.
Well, let's just go back to the lady that just needs some milk. So if she's got a crisis situation and it's occurred many times, but she can't really respond to her situation, somebody, officer, let's say it's just a local police officer shows up, how does he know that she just needs milk?
Certainly. So we've all heard of the federal HIPAA confidentiality guidelines.
Correct.
42 CFR. There's a phrase that I've always trained my staff on, and it's actually a phrase that I stole from Judge Michael Evans, that when risk or potential danger is perceived, confidentiality begins to evaporate. And I love that phrase. It doesn't completely disappear, but it evaporates enough for a person to be able to help someone do their job. So if law enforcement called us and they're out with Jane, we'll call her Jane, and they're in the middle of a crisis with her, what can you give me? We're going to be able to help release enough information in that crisis to be helpful to that officer and to that patient. We can't go into the full detailed history, as it doesn't evaporate completely, but it is enough for us to be helpful. And I think that is the understanding and the key regarding a partnership, a regional local partnership, is because we'll know, hey, it's Olympic Health calling. Let's open up our file, see what we can offer.
Right. And just to add to that, we focus on trying to provide an intervention service at the time the individual needs it. And throughout our whole process, whether the call comes in from a regional crisis line or directly to the mobile crisis team or to the DCR, one of the things that we do well in our region is those handoffs between the organizations. There's a communication from the regional crisis line when they're going to go out to dispatch or provide information to the mobile crisis team or boots on the ground that's going to go out into the community. There's that handoff of information to assist with that dispatch so that individual is safe, or maybe they need to call in law enforcement. There's that transfer of information. If it gets to the point where there's a DCR involved, the DCR will do their work, connect with the mobile crisis team if they've been involved, and learn some of that history. So there is that knowledge sharing within our network.
I can give you a great example of a time that it worked beautifully. And this was a few years back. I received a call from Chief Huda with Longview Police Department. Said, Drew, I need to notify you. We just got a call from Bob's Sporting Goods that client so-and-so just attempted to purchase a firearm. Now, one of the things that happens on the federal and state level, there's what's called qualifying events. A commitment by a judge for a behavioral health need is a qualifying event. If we look at that hearing that we described earlier, where there's the Superior Court clerk, the Superior Court judge, prosecuting defense, all this, court clerk, if the judge issues a commitment order, every court clerk has as a database that they go and they enter that commitment order, because it becomes what's called a qualifying event, immediately after the court hearing. At midnight every night across the nation, that database feeds into the federal, what's called NICS database. This NICS database is the database that if you're working at Bob's and I go to buy a gun, or Sportsman's and I go to buy a gun, they're going to look at my name and my demographics and compare it to this NICS database. And if I've had one of those qualifying events, a prior commitment, it's going to be a flag go up. Then you notify the local police authority, so Drew just came in to buy a gun. So Chief Huda was notified by Bob's, this person came in to try to buy a gun. Her name was flagged. We warned you. Chief Huda picked up the phone and said, Drew, let's talk about this person. And this person was extremely well known. And he goes, can you get boots on the ground and go talk and figure out what's going on? And sure enough, we'd found out that the person had an insurance change, loss of her ability to pay for medications, was becoming more psychotic. So we were able to make an intervention and return her to a level where she understood the dangers he presented when she was not medicated. That's a beautiful example of reasonably available information. Joe's team doesn't have that NICS database access, but law enforcement does for him.
So you said a lot of very interesting things in that statement. So you're telling me we currently have a system whereby somebody who has been entered into the database nationally, when they go to purchase a gun, it pops up that this person has a qualifying event, and then we have the opportunity to stop them from buying a gun.
Yes, there is a federal code that oversees it. I disagree with the language in the federal code. The federal code in these circumstances refers to the patient as a, quote, mental defective. I don't like that terminology. It's time to change it. But that is the terminology for a commitment qualifying event. And because of that, every state, when they have a commitment order from a judge, the clerk enters that into the database, and at midnight it transfers over and it's entered within, I think, 48 hours into the larger NICS database. And that is something that is accessible by all law enforcement entities.
Wow. I find that very interesting because the people who are anti-gun continue to pitch this notion that we have to have all these things to prevent people from buying a gun. And as a gun owner myself, it's not easy to buy a gun even when you're not mentally deficient. And I did not know that we already have a program in existence that prevents that from happening.
Yes, sir, we do. It helps prevent that from happening. Again, as a gun owner, if we follow the legal guidelines to obtain the gun.
Okay, we run a little bit past our hour, but I thought it was interesting. Go ahead. I don't want to deny anybody questions. We just are, I'm letting you know we're running past.
Jennifer Leach with WSU Extension. This is great information, and thank you to the Board of Health to inviting Great Rivers BHO. And Drew, I think I've been around a little bit longer than you, but anyway, it's good to see you. And it's just wonderful, the history that has come forth. And but a couple questions from a prevention side is actually just a little bit of background. Extension, we have a local person as part of a statewide grant on suicide prevention related to ag workers, Debbie Fredericks. So, but she offered a QPR training to 4-H leaders. And so I went through it a couple weeks ago. So, but what it reminded me is many, many years ago, and I'm going to give this question to Drew, are there any agencies currently doing QPR training?
To my knowledge, there are a lot of individuals being trained in it, but not a lot of entities providing the question per se, persuade, prefer training. It is a wonderful training. Most entities are combining it with what's called the behavioral health first aid treatment model.
Okay.
But none specifically just doing that.
Okay. And then the other question to Drew is, I know many years ago we did the 5 for Life. Do you remember that? So is 5 for Life and QPR and mental health first aid training, they're not the same, is that correct?
No, exactly. 5 for Life is something that I created years ago when I was in graduate school. And we put that in the schools, and we still do that within our middle and high schools in our community.
Great, thank you. And I think kudos to the commissioners from many years ago, as we used to have what was called a Regional Support Network, RSN, and somehow the law changed or whatever. So Carlos Carrion, who used to be department head for Health and Human Services for the county, he was really behind it. We formed Great Rivers BHO and focus on the counties we're focused on rather than counties to the south, knowing that the current counties served by the Great Rivers BHO have a different need than our southern urban counties. So anyway, I think kudos to the past. So again, I was on actually, we used to have a SAB board, Substance Abuse Advisory Board, run by Carl Erickson. And then we had a mental health advisory board and within Health and Human Services, and we had a disability board and a public health board, and then it was all combined to a, within Health and Human Services as a health advisory board. So, you know, I guess where I'm going with this is great information, and I'm hoping that that the PowerPoint will be shared so I can share it with the folks I work with, and great presentation. So thank you, the Commissioner and Board of Health for inviting for Great Rivers BHO.
Well, and that's Commissioner, kudos to him for inviting them back. I think this is the kind of Board of Health meeting that we all would like to see moving forward, spreading this type of information and being able to make better decisions for our community.
Worthwhile discussion.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you so much.
No, we
your time.
appreciate you guys taking the time and visiting with us. If the audience feels like we do and want to support the Regional 988 being down here, get with them and get the letter and put that in, because I think that's a good thing for us. And other than that, thank you again. And
You're
we
welcome.
will
Thank
adjourn.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.